Okay, today we're talking about cellular respiration, which is the way your cells create energy, and photosynthesis, which is the way plant cells create food. If your cell is going to maintain homeostasis, a stable internal environment, your cell needs to use energy. So all eukaryotic cells, whether they are plant cells or animal cells, all do photosynthesis. Energy from the sun is converted to organic compounds in photosynthesis. Okay, so on the slide here, it says that solar energy, which is when energy comes from the sun, is converted into organic compounds, things you can eat, through the process of photosynthesis. We cannot do photosynthesis. So why is this important? We eat plants. So everything that you eat was either a plant that did photosynthesis or was something that ate a plant that did photosynthesis. So we are indirectly getting all of our energy from the sun. This is a molecule of glucose. Now there's a couple things that I want to point out here. First of all, glucose has 6 carbons. It's difficult to see in this diagram, but at each of these points, right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here, there is a carbon. This is an organic chemistry abbreviated way of drawing this molecule. You also have this carbon right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. You'll also notice that it's in a ring shape, which we talked about in Unit 1, that most carbohydrates are stored in a ring shape. This glucose is the product of photosynthesis. Food molecules that are made or consumed by an organism are used for fuel in its cells. They use these molecules, meaning glucose, to release the energy stored in the bonds of those molecules. So if we go back to this picture, when you start breaking this molecule apart, in each of these lines here, this indicates a bond. As we start breaking these bonds, those bonds release energy. Which organelle in the cell is responsible for releasing energy? The mitochondria. It's the powerhouse of the cell. When photosynthesis takes place, energy is going to come into the ecosystem to take these carbon dioxide molecules that you're constantly breathing out and use the sunlight to convert them into glucose. Okay? In which organelle does photosynthesis take place? The chloroplast. So to recap, the sunlight comes into the cell and it helps to convert carbon dioxide into glucose. Carbon dioxide will be a reactant of this reaction. Glucose will be a product. Once the plant has made the glucose, we can break that glucose down through cellular respiration. If you look at this diagram down here, we're going to start up here at the sun. Sunlight provides the energy. Photosynthesis takes that energy, captures it, and turns it into glucose. That glucose, can be eaten by a heterotroph and broken down into energy. Okay. What I want you to notice about this diagram are these two processes that we're talking about, photosynthesis and cellular respiration, are complete opposites of each other. What percent of the energy in sunlight is used for photosynthesis? We get a lot of sunlight that hits our planet every single day, but what percent of that energy is actually used for photosynthesis? Only 1%. So they're only using 1% of that energy for photosynthesis to create all the food we eat. So there's got to be an efficient way of doing that. The chloroplast, which is an organelle in a plant cell, converts the light energy from the sun into chemical energy. The chloroplasts have a membrane just like the plasma membrane on the outside of the cell. Here comes vocab. Inside your cells, you have cytoplasm. Inside the chloroplasts, you have stroma. Within the stroma is a membrane called the thylakoid membrane, and they hold these tiny little structures called thylakoids. So it's kind of like little jelly beans inside of the chloroplasts. And they stack up, and a stack of thylakoids is called a granum. We'll look at a picture of this in just a moment. The thylakoids are going to be the structures inside the chloroplasts that contain molecules that will absorb that light energy for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis begins as soon as the light energy hits those stacks of thylakoids. Here we go, okay? This is your membrane on your chloroplast. This jelly bean looking thing is your chloroplast. So you have your membrane outside of your chloroplast. There's actually a double membrane. Inside your chloroplast, you have these things that look like stacks of pancakes. These are your thylakoids. And remember, a stack of thylakoids is called a granum. The stroma is the space between all the thylakoids, kind of like your cytoplasm in your cells is that space between all of your organelles. Let's talk a little bit about light, which travels in waves. Down here we have the electromagnetic spectrum. The visible light that you see that is reflecting off of everything that you can lay your eyes on, even this computer screen, is contained right here in the ultraviolet spectrum. This is the only part of the spectrum that you can see. Okay, as we get here into ultraviolet light, this would be the sunlight that burns or tans your skin. Then you have X-rays and gamma rays. Over here on this side of the spectrum, we have infrared light, which provides a lot of heat, radio waves, and microwaves. At this part of the diagram, you can see over here, radio waves, they're very large waves. This 100 meters talks about the distance from this point to this point. And you can see over here, gamma rays, there's a very small distance from this point to this point. These are more powerful waves in terms of their energy because there's more waves hitting you per second than there are here. Sunlight contains all visible light. So we see these as different colors, okay? And each color has its own measurement. So if you look on your PowerPoint, you'll see below all these colors, there's actual measurements for those lights. So why can you see light? You have cells in your eye that contains pigment. A pigment is going to absorb certain colors of light and reflect all of the others. In plants, light is taken in, absorbed by pigments that are located in the thylakoids in the chloroplasts. So what is that pigment in chloroplasts called? That's chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is green. It's in chloroplasts, which makes your chloroplasts appear green. And that is what absorbs that light energy. Chlorophyll absorbs mostly blue and red light, and it reflects green and yellow light. So the colors that you see are not being absorbed, they are being reflected back at you. Plants have two types of chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Each picks up different wavelengths of light so that the plant can harvest as much light energy as possible. There are other types of pigments called carotenoids. They absorb blue and green light and reflect yellow, orange, and red. So why do leaves turn reddish orange in the fall? What happens is the chlorophyll starts to break down. And as that chlorophyll breaks down, we can no longer see that green color. The carotenoids that are still in the leaves are now able to be seen, and you see all of those different colors. Different trees and different plants are going to have different levels of carotenoids, which is why some trees turn yellow and some trees turn red and some trees turn orange. This is another shot of the visible light. What this white line shows you is what is being absorbed by chlorophyll. The higher the line, the more chlorophyll is absorbing that color. So you can see all of these colors down here are being reflected, which is why plants look green. They're really absorbing the blue and the red colors from the sunlight. So where are these pigments found? They are found inside the thylakoid. You must know that the thylakoid is where that chlorophyll is contained. Scientists are going to talk about photosynthesis in two parts. You have the light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions. The light-dependent reactions take place within the thylakoid membrane. And remember, the thylakoids are inside the chloroplasts. The light-independent reaction has its own name. It's called the Calvin cycle, and it takes place in the stroma. Remember, the stroma is similar to the cytoplasm. It's the space inside the chloroplast between all the thylakoids. When the sunlight is captured by pigments, electrons are going to get a lot of energy. Okay, so sunlight is going to be captured by the pigments, which is going to charge up these electrons. Where are these electrons coming from? They're coming from water. Water is another reactant in photosynthesis. It's something that goes into it. So in your leaf, there's going to be a bunch of pigments in there. The pigments here, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B. This is the pigment in your carotenoids, and xanthophylls are also yellowish type pigments. There's going to need to be an electron carrier to carry all of these excited electrons. One of these is called NADP+. Here is the really long, fancy name. You don't need to know that. You need to know NADP+. What you need to know about NADP+ is that it holds 2 electrons. Okay? When it's holding 2 electrons, it actually converts into a different molecule called NADPH. This NADPH is what's going to take these electrons to a different part of the chloroplast to help photosynthesis proceed. Okay, so the first part in this reaction, light hits the thylakoid, it's absorbed by those pigments, and those pigments get electrons that get excited and carried off by NADPH.